I hurried after Regina through the streets, glancing over my shoulder to ensure we weren't being followed. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as we ducked into a side street and wove between the parked cars. Bastian was right beside me, his presence a reassuring constant in the chaos. Suddenly, the sound of screeching tires filled the air. A dark sedan careened around the corner, its windows rolled down to reveal the glint of a gun barrel. Regina shouted,
"Get down!"
just as a shot rang out. I felt the heat of the bullet whiz past my ear as I dove for cover behind a dumpster. Regina cried out in pain, clutching her arm as crimson blood seeped through her fingers. Bastian rushed to her side, his face etched with concern.
"You're hit! We need to get you to a hospital!"
Regina shook her head, gritting her teeth against the pain.
"No hospitals. They'll be watching. I know a place we can go, but we need to move."
Bastian and I exchanged a worried glance, but I trusted Regina. We helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as we fled down the alley. The roar of engines grew louder behind us. Another car had joined the pursuit, their headlights glaring like predatory eyes. Bastian risked a glance over his shoulder.
"They're gaining on us."
Regina pointed to a narrow side street.
"This way, quickly!"
We stumbled down the alley, the cars screeching to a halt behind us. I heard the sound of doors slamming and feet pounding on the pavement. Our pursuers were closing in. Just as I thought we were done for, Regina pulled aside a rusted metal grate, revealing a dark, gaping hole in the ground.
"Get in!"
she hissed, ushering us forward. Bastian wrinkled his nose as we descended into the dank, musty tunnels.
"Ugh, it smells like something died down here."
Regina let out a grim laugh, then winced as her injured arm moved.
"Wouldn't be surprised if something did. These tunnels, they've got stories, and most of them ain't pretty. Lots of death and pain down here."
I shot Bastian a quelling look, then turned to Regina. "Where are we going? How do you know about these tunnels?" Regina's face was pale in the dim light filtering through the grates above, but her eyes glinted with a fierce determination.
"We're heading to a place where no one will think to look for us. No nice girls go there."
Bastian snorted.
"Well, that rules you out, Rosie. You're the nicest girl I know."
Leave it to Bastian to crack jokes in the middle of a life-or-death situation. We trudged through the damp, echoing tunnels, the only light coming from the occasional grate overhead. The air was thick with the stench of mold and decay, and I had to fight the urge to gag. Just as I thought we were lost, Regina paused before a rusted metal door.
"We're here."
Bastian and I exchanged uncertain looks as Regina pushed the door open, the creak echoing eerily in the cool tunnels.
"The Jefferson Market Library,"
Regina said, striding into an antique brick-vaulted chamber filled with leather-bound books.
"It was once a women's courthouse and prison that saw plenty of death and suffering."
Blood continued to bloom across Regina's blouse, where the bullet grazed the back of her arm. "Here, let me help," I said, guiding Regina to a musty velvet sofa. I tore a strip of fabric from my own shirt to bandage the wound. Regina grimaced but continued.
"In 1911, a fire broke out in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, just a block away from here. The factory was notorious for its poor working conditions and labor disputes. In fact, just a few years earlier, the factory workers, mostly young immigrant women, had gone on strike to protest low wages, long hours, and oppressive rules. During the strike, many of these brave women were imprisoned here where we stand. They were tried in night court, a tactic meant to intimidate them by associating them with the prostitutes whose cases were usually heard there at night. As one striker put it, no nice girls go there. But the women remained undaunted, and their strike led to some improvements in working conditions. Tragically, it wasn't enough. When the fire broke out in 1911, 146 garment workers, mostly young women and girls, were killed. Some died in the flames, while others jumped to their deaths from the high windows with no other means of escape. The fire was a turning point in labor history.
A solemnity descended on the library chamber as she spoke of the disaster.
The prison closed and was reborn as a library, the perfect secret headquarters for the Order of the Nine Realms.
Bastian wandered the dim chamber, taking in the exposed brick archways.
So you're saying in a city with thousands of skyscrapers, the creepy feminist Illuminati gathers in an old prison basement?
Regina scowled at his jibe.
I'll have you know our society traces its roots back to the Library of Alexandria in Egypt, founded in the 3rd century BCE. It was the largest and most significant library of the ancient world.
Seems like wherever your little cult goes, fire ensues.
Regina leaned forward on the sofa, eyes blazing despite her wound.
Scholars from all over the Mediterranean came to study and conduct research at the Library of Alexandria. But what few people know is that the library also housed a collection of ancient texts from even older civilizations.
My heart quickened as I started to connect the dots.
The library housed a group of 9 scrolls, fragments from an ancient library, said to have traveled from the port of Kamos in Crete. These artifacts contained cryptic information about 9 realms and goddesses, touching on the intersection of science, spirituality, and mathematics.
I felt a shiver run down my spine. Could these be the origins of the Voynich Manuscript's mysterious content?
We believe so. However, when the scholar and poet Callimachus created the Pinnaces, the first library catalog, he struggled with how to categorize the 9 realms scrolls, as they defied easy classification.
Bastian chuckled.
Typical. They couldn't handle anything that didn't fit into their narrow little boxes.
Regina smiled wryly.
It's a familiar story, isn't it? Those scholars, the ones all about that secular learning, they straight up ignored the 9 realms scrolls, brushed them off as some religious cult nonsense.
But some librarians must have recognized the importance of the scrolls, right? I asked, already knowing the answer. Regina nodded.
According to our lore, a few did. And although we don't know their names, we know they took it upon themselves to preserve and protect this knowledge. Centuries later, the Library of Alexandria began to decline, and the city was embroiled in political turmoil. Luckily, during the siege and fires of Alexandria, they smuggled the 9 realms scrolls to the Library of Serapeum. There, a group of scribe apprentices worked tirelessly to transcribe the scrolls into 9 codices, the historical ancestors of the modern book.
I leaned forward, hanging on to Regina's every word. And what happened to the books after that?
They remained in the Serapeum for several centuries, until the library was destroyed by Roman Christians. Fortunately, the books were rescued by Hypatia and her father in their efforts to preserve seminal mathematical books.
Bastian's eyes widened.
Hypatia.
Regina nodded.
Yes, Hypatia was a remarkable woman. She was renowned for her teachings in mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. When she learned of the 9 codices, she became fascinated by their contents. She gathered a group of her most trusted students and colleagues to study the books in secret, hoping to unravel their mysteries.
I felt a chill run down my spine. But Hypatia was killed by a Christian mob, wasn't she? Because of her pagan beliefs and her teachings? Regina's expression turned stormy.
It wasn't just that. Hypatia was into those 9 books, with all their wild ideas about women's power and ancient goddess-worshipping cultures. That made her a target. The Christian establishment, they were on the rise, and they saw her as a threat to their boys' club.
So they silenced her.
Regina nodded, her expression grim.
One of the first documented witch hunts in history. But Hypatia and her crew, they had a plan to keep those books safe. They knew the knowledge in those pages was too valuable, too risky, to let it disappear.
What did they do? I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer.
They divided the books among themselves and fled Alexandria, each taking a different path to avoid detection. They scattered across the globe, some as far as Constantinople and Baghdad, each tasked with safeguarding their portion of the knowledge. They committed to reproducing them once every couple of centuries as the materials aged. We lost track of all of the books until now.
I felt a swell of admiration for these brave men and women. risking everything to preserve the legacy of a civilization that the world was determined to forget. And the Order of the Nine Realms? Is that when it was formed? Regina shook her head.
Not officially, but the seeds were planted then, in the hearts and minds of Hypatia's followers.
She stood up, her injured arm cradled against her chest.
It wasn't until centuries later, in medieval times, that the society formally came together. Scholars, artists, healers, and mystics from across Europe, each holding a small piece of the puzzle, united in their quest to rediscover the lost wisdom of the Nine Realms.
Bastian smirked.
So is Tay-Tay in on this? I mean, she's all about squads and secret societies, right?
I glared at him, gently adjusting the makeshift bandage on Regina's arm. Is this really the time for snark? Regina is hurt, we were almost killed, and you're making pop culture jokes? Regina hauled herself up, eyes fierce even though she was hurting.
Bastian's not too far off, you know. We've only got one rule for joining. One must not be orthodox in her opinion. We've got pop stars, athletes, politicians, all kinds of powerful women hiding right under everyone's noses.
Bastian let out a low whistle.
And now here we are, two humble journalists stumbling headlong into a centuries-old conspiracy.
I shot him a wry smile. Humble? Journalist? You? He grinned, and for a moment the tension in the room lifted. But then Regina stepped forward, her expression grave.
Amalia, you have a choice to make. You can walk away now, forget everything you've learned, and go back to your normal life. Or you can join us and help us find the lost books and the truth they hold.
Wasn't that why I became a journalist in the first place? To uncover the truth, no matter how deep it was buried or how dangerous the pursuit?